Hello and welcome to Cambridge Clinical. This video is going to be addressing how to answer the how important questions in the UCAT. These questions will give you a scenario typically in which you will have to make a decision as to what action to take or what thing to say, and then it will give you a consideration. Your job is to choose how important that consideration is when making your decision. In these questions, it can either be very important, important, of minor importance, or not important at all. These questions can be quite daunting, but in my opinion, there are two key questions you can ask yourself to try and simplify what you've been given. The first is, will this fact or this consideration change my course of action? If it does change your course of action, it's clearly at least important, because it's the basis of your decision. More specifically, we can say, as a general rule, if a consideration is the main reason that you're making a decision, it's very important. If, however, it's going to influence the choice you make, but it's doing so alongside other equally or more important factors, we might say it's just important. If the consideration is not going to change your course of action, it's clearly of minor importance, or not even important at all. More specifically again, if the fact is completely irrelevant to whether or not you take a course of action, it's not important at all. If it's somewhat relevant and it might bear on your mind when you're making your choice, but ultimately won't change what you do, we might say it is of minor importance. The other key question you can ask yourself if you're struggling is there clear violation or support of one of our 4 ethical pillars? We know that these 4 pillars underpin every decision we must make, both as medical students and as doctors. So if there's clear reference to one of them, be it in support or violation, it's likely to be one of the more extreme answers, so very important or not important at all. If, on the other hand, the consideration does not directly relate to the pillars, it could still be very important, but there's scope for it to be less so. Let's look at some examples now of considerations of varying degrees of importance. First of all, here are some very important considerations. So the passage reads, Mia, a medical student, is on placement at an antenatal clinic in a rural community. The clinic is under-resourced with only 1 doctor and 3 midwives. A patient comes into the clinic to have her baby delivered. Most staff, including the doctors, are unavailable as they are dealing with emergencies. An experienced midwife requests support from Mia to deliver the baby. Mia does not feel comfortable helping deliver the baby. So your options here, number 1, as a consideration, is her degree of competence. Number 2, the risks involved in delivering the baby. And number 3, that she does not feel comfortable helping to deliver the baby. So here are those options listed. Why not pause the video now and ask yourself the 2 key questions to try and work out why these options are very important considerations. So the reason these are all very important considerations is that all are key factors as to what decision she should actually make. For example, if her degree of competence was high, the risks were low, and she did feel comfortable, the right decision would definitely be to help with the birth, especially given how understaffed this place is. However, if her degree of competence is very low, the risks are very high, and she does not feel comfortable, she should definitely not assist. This is because she could end up doing more harm than good. Therefore, you can see that all of these options alone would be enough to entirely determine her course of action, and thus are very important. Furthermore, because we're talking about helping, i.e. doing good, and risk-taking, i.e. doing harm, these options also all relate directly to the ideas of beneficence and non-maleficence, and therefore rather than simply being important, they're very important. Here are a few examples now of considerations that are not important at all. So this passage reads, Vinny is with a group of other medical students revising anatomy in the dissecting room. There are dead bodies in the room. Some other students come in. Vinny and his group notice that one of these students, his friend Kim, is not a medical student. Vinny notices that Kim is taking photos of the bodies. Kim explains that she borrowed a medical student's ID badge so that she could get into the dissecting room. Vinny knows that only medical students are allowed in this room and that no one is allowed to take photos. He needs to decide whether to report Kim's behaviour. So your first consideration is, that Kim will be in a lot of trouble if he reports her. The second consideration is that lots of other students notice as well, so someone else may report it. And the third consideration is whether Kim knows that she is not permitted in the room or to take photos. Now once again, here are those options in list form. I'd invite you to pause the video and ask yourself the key questions to work out why these are not important at all. So the fact is that whether or not Kim will be in trouble, whether others noticed as well, or whether Kim knows that she's breaking the rules, have literally no bearing on what you must do. Regardless of all of these factors, you must report Kim, because it's your duty as a medical student to uphold the rules. Therefore, as unpleasant as it may be, none of these factors can influence your decision at all. That is why they're not important at all to consider. The other thing is that, as we discussed in a previous video about the 4 pillars, when dignity is compromised and when rule breaking is involved, we're talking directly about the pillar of justice. Therefore, given that all these options relate to one of the 4 pillars, we're once again dealing with an extreme answer. So rather than just being of minor importance, they're all actually of no importance at all. Here's an example of a consideration that is just important. So the passage reads, Serena is a dental student who is shadowing a senior dentist, Mr. Wardett. Mr. Wardett is replacing a filling for a patient using a brand new tool. The tool is different to the one Serena conducted her training on at university. A few days later, another patient requires a filling replacement, and Mr. Wardett asks Serena to conduct the procedure while he supervises. She is not confident in her ability to use the new tool. And your consideration here is that Mr. Wardett may not be aware of what tool she trained on at university. So again, pause the video and try and work out why this is an important consideration. So here, this is definitely a factor that you should consider, because if Mr. Wardett is not aware of what tool she trained on, he might be overestimating her ability and therefore offering her an opportunity that is not safe. So it should definitely affect her decision. However, let's reread that last sentence of the passage. She is not confident in her ability to use the new tool. Now that is a far more important factor than Mr. Wardett's knowledge. That's not to say that his knowledge is irrelevant, but it isn't actually the main factor that should drive her decision. That main factor is her confidence and her ability to use the tool. Therefore, while this is an important consideration, it isn't the most important determinant of her decision. Finally then, let's look at a few considerations that are of minor importance. So this reads, Shannon, a medical student, is on a flight to Thailand for a holiday. With 2 hours until landing, a flight attendant makes an announcement asking if there are any medically qualified people on board, as there has been a medical emergency. Shannon has had a lot of medical training, but is not yet a qualified doctor. The announcement repeats a few times, and Shannon suspects that there are no medically qualified people on board. Other passengers are becoming increasingly anxious because of all the repeated announcements. Shannon must decide if she should respond to the call. The first consideration is that even if she does respond to the call, Shannon may not be able to assist in a meaningful way. The second is that the passengers are becoming increasingly anxious because of the repeated announcement. And the third is that another passenger may still come forward as medically qualified. So for the last time, here is a list of those options, and I'd invite you to pause the video and try and work out why these considerations are of minor importance. So let's think about this. The course of action that Shannon should take is definitely to put herself forward to help. That is because it appears that she might be the most medically qualified person on the plane, and therefore the right thing to do is to offer to help. Now it is true that she may not be able to assist very much, and it's true that another passenger might still come forward. However, really, those are bridges that she can cross when she comes to them. The fact of the matter is that none of these factors affect whether she should put herself forward right now. Therefore, we know that this is either of minor importance or not important at all. The reason these factors are not important at all is because they're still sort of relevant. For example, if another passenger did come forward, or if she could not help at all, then at that point she might have to think again and change her course of action. However, at this specific moment in time, they have no bearing on what decision she should make. So just remember, always ask yourself those 2 key questions. Remember, you'll be given partial marks even if you're close to the correct answer. Each subsection of the question should be considered independently, so don't let yourself be distracted by what you answered in one part of the question when answering the next part. And don't be put off if you give the same answer for all subsections. That is completely possible.